3 months ago, a TV reporter is found dead in his hotel room.
He was found face down in a pillow with sparing of lividity, with no lividity around his nose and mouth.
Since his sudden death, the case has had so many twists and turns. Like a woman with a history of allegedly drugging and robbing men was arrested in connection to his case. She's now charged with second-degree murder. Then her alleged accomplice was suddenly arrested after he was charged with just property and computer crimes.
We found correspondence and information where they were going back and forth, so we think they were working hand in hand in concert with each other on this. So that's basically where I'm going to leave it.
Now he's facing a murder charge too.
I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Now this might feel like deja vu. First, Danette Colbert was initially charged with property crimes. Then her charges were upgraded to murder. And the exact same thing happened to her alleged accomplice, Ricky White, who is now charged with second-degree murder as well.
In early February, Adan Manzano was found dead in a hotel room while on assignment for work. Officials know the cause of death. However, the manner of death, that's different.
The cause of death we have as the combined toxic effects of alprazolam, which is also known as Xanax, with ethanol, which is alcohol, along with what's called positional asphyxia. The positional asphyxia means that he was found face down in a pillow with sparing of lividity, with no lividity around his nose and mouth. The manner of death at this point is undetermined. Now, to give a little more detail on the intoxication, his alcohol level was 0.232, which, as most people know, is almost 3 times the legal limit of alcohol. His Xanax level was 25 nanograms per milliliter. Now, that's just a number, but to give you an idea, a person who's taking a milligram of Xanax 3 times a day, which is a very healthy dose of Xanax, would achieve a level of about 30 nanograms per milliliter. So it's not an insignificant amount of Xanax in his system. In most cases of an overdose of Xanax, especially, and I'm talking about Xanax alone, those levels are usually over 100. However, when combined with other central nervous systems depressants, that amount goes way down. So those combined effects is what causes where we are today. People ask about, why is it undetermined? Well, in most cases of overdose deaths, the manner of death is accidental. Okay, and that's whether or not there's positional asphyxia or not. They're usually classified as accidental. However, given the uncertain circumstances of this case and the additional collection of circumstances of this case, we felt that the most appropriate manner of death is undetermined.
Although it's undetermined, both Danette Colbert and Ricky White are now facing second-degree murder. The murder charge for Ricky comes after months of investigation. Detectives found text messages between the two painting the picture that the two were allegedly in on a robbery scheme together. For example, detectives say the phrase knockout was used in messages between Danette and Ricky. According to a previous report by KMBC, police say Danette would target her victims by providing them with alcohol and alprazolam, aka Xanax, while Ricky would provide the rides. That was their usual way of allegedly doing things. However, in this case, Ricky reportedly didn't drive, but instead paid for a rental car used by Danette. So Ricky never physically met Adan. Only Danette went up to his room and left all by herself. Police say the scheme unraveled like this. Danette would steal a victim's phone, get into the phone, and access the victim's bank accounts. In one text message Danette allegedly wrote about Adan, she said, "Got the phone, he got the money, waiting for him to sleep, about to check the ATM, then to you." Kenner Police Detective Jeffrey Fitzmaurice testified during a previous hearing that on the day Adan was found in his hotel room, Danette and Ricky communicated 30 times that day. He also reportedly testified the intention wasn't to murder Adan, but cause unconsciousness. And when Danette was initially arrested, police found Adan's cell phone and credit cards in her home.
Detectives processing the hotel room, Mr. Manzano's hotel room, they had discovered that a credit card was missing. It was the same credit card that was used to check into the hotel, as well as a cell phone that was missing. They additionally went to the front desk and reviewed the video surveillance from the security cameras in the hotel, and that's when they observed Mr. Manzano arriving at his room about 4:30 or 5 in the morning on February 5th. entering the room. Short time later, the female left and then came back, and then by 6 a.m. she left and never returned. Mr. Manzano was not seen on that security footage after entering that room. Investigation led us to develop a suspect, Ms. Danette Colbert, who is on the screen behind me. Ms. Colbert has quite a record and rap sheet for confidence games, access device fraud, and robbery schemes. So the investigation led to a search warrant and an arrest warrant, one being issued for the person of Ms. Colbert and the other for her residence in Slidell. The Kenner Police Department, along with the Major Crimes Task Force, did locate Ms. Colbert in the city of New Orleans last night about 10:30. She was taken into custody. She is still in the city of New Orleans being processed as a fugitive. With the assistance of the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office, a search warrant was executed at her residence, at which time Mr. Manzano's credit card and cell phone were located inside that residence. Some narcotics were found, as well as a stolen firearm. We don't believe the firearm's related to this case. So that's what we have at this time. I'm willing to answer any questions you might have, and we will make available the past arrests. It's important to note that Ms. Colbert's criminal history does include 2 instances where she drugged a victim and stole his access device cards and things of that nature.
Plus, in court, Ricky and Danette's relationship was described as a prostitute-pimp situation, which is interesting because when Ricky was initially arrested, police described him as a transient.
We have identified and arrested an accomplice of Danette Colbert, Ricky White, who's kind of a transient. His last known address was in Gretna. Officers had developed him as a suspect going through information and evidence of this case. He was, a warrant was issued for him. He was found in Hollywood, Florida. Friday, he was taken into custody by U.S. Marshals, Hollywood Police Department, and Secret Service Task Force, as well as members of the Kenner Police Department. So he is now in custody in the Broward County Sheriff's Office Jail in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, awaiting extradition. He was charged with the property crimes of simple robbery, access device fraud, illegal transmission of monetary funds, bank fraud, and computer fraud. So he's facing the same charges that Danette Colbert is locked down on right now. Another development is, based on evidence obtained since her initial arrest on February 6th, Kenner police officers have obtained an arrest warrant for second-degree murder yesterday on Colbert, and she was booked on that this morning in the Jefferson Parish Correctional Center. So now, as this case is ripe for prosecution, as it goes forward to the DA's office, I'm not really going to be giving much information on that because I don't want to compromise the adjudication of this case. Mr. Connick is going to be having to prosecute this case, and I'm not going to make his job any more challenging by trying it in the media as opposed to the courtroom. So that's all the information I have, other than she was booked this morning for second-degree murder based on a warrant that was signed by a commissioner, based on a probable cause in that warrant. I can tell you, to recap is basically what we said. We don't want Ms. Colbert to see the light of day again. We have worked collectively with Governor Landry, General Morrell, DA Connick, DA Williams, Colonel Hodges, Superintendent Kirkpatrick, Sheriff Randy Smith. All the probations in New Orleans and Jefferson Parish have either been revoked or there's motions to revoke them. She's got open charges in Kenner and St. Tammany, and General Morrell has invoked the Habitual Offender Act in New Orleans to try her for some serious time. So, I want to thank the cooperative effort of all our law enforcement agencies in this area, coroner's office, and getting the job done and being concerned about the safety of our public here in the metro area.
So Danette was arrested in February, Ricky the following month, and it's likely there's no chance of them taking off because the judge ordered the two to be held on no bond after the judge ruled that they were both dangers to the public. A second suspect now charged with second-degree murder. This case continues to have lots of twists, but is it really surprising that Ricky White was also charged with murder given what the text messages allegedly between him and Danette Colbert actually said? So let's break this down further with Law and Crime legal analyst Julie Rendelman. Julie, always great to see you. Always love having you on. I'm not really surprised Ricky White was also charged with second-degree murder. Authorities linked him to the case weeks ago and previously described his relationship with Danette Colbert as kind of like a pimp prostitute type of situation. But what are your thoughts?
So, I thought it's definitely a more difficult case for him than it would be potentially for her. Because remember, we don't see him coming out of the building. We don't see him going in with the victim. And so, again, we don't know everything, but it sounds like they're tying him based at least partially on text messages between him and the other co-defendant that seemed to indicate that he was very, very, very much involved in the robbery and ultimately the death of this reporter.
And it seems like the text messages kind of painted a really sinister picture, because before these text messages came out, we always just thought, it was just Danette Colbert allegedly acting on her own. But, when you see text messages referring to victims as knockouts or KOs, and you see Danette allegedly text Ricky saying, got the phone code, he got money. What are your thoughts when you think of just what these two kind of had in their mind as far as allegedly trying to drug and rob men? And in this case, one of the victims died.
Sure. And I think, anytime you have one of these cases of a homicide where an individual dies, in this case, and, where there's alcohol, Xanax in their system, and the cause of death is some kind of suffocation, it's not really clear whether or not they are responsible for their death, whether or not someone intentionally gave them those drugs. They've basically made it out for the prosecution. So they've laid it out in their text what their plan was. And so that makes it a much stronger case for the prosecution in going forward with both against both of those individuals.
And I want to go back to something you had mentioned within the first question, just about the defense and what the defense may possibly argue as far as Ricky White goes. Now, we know that Ricky White wasn't in the hotel room. He didn't meet Adan Manzano in person. But what else do you think the defense will use to their advantage when it comes to Ricky White in particular?
Sure. When we talk about this, certainly in New York, we talk about kind of the felony murder aspect. So you don't have to necessarily intend to have killed an individual if you commit a robbery and they die as a result. There is some law in regards to giving someone drugs, which happened in this case, if they're able to prove that shows that they were the reason that this individual died. With that said, I think one of the defenses is going to be, A, he wasn't there, B, these are just texts between them, and there's no necessarily corroboration that he actually did anything more than just receive and send these texts. And so I think they're going to try to shift the blame onto her as being the person that was there, the person who potentially drugged him, the person who took his cards, and kind of the initiator of everything.
And what are your thoughts overall just about this alleged scheme that Ricky White and Danette Colbert were allegedly pulling, like finding men, incapacitating them, and in this case, using Xanax to pretty much, because to your point, the intent was not to kill Adan Manzano. It was allegedly to just take money from him. But what are your thoughts just about this scheme of, allegedly drugging and robbing men and just taking off?
We hear about this a lot, I think, more now than we used to. Not that it wasn't prevalent. Remember, a lot of people won't come forward when they're the victim of this type of crime. Sometimes it's embarrassing for them. They don't want anyone to know that they were the victim because they feel foolish, they feel embarrassed. And we know, at least from what we've read, that at least the female defendant was involved in similar acts before. So this is not something new to her and potentially Mr. White as well. And so it's quite, I think the tragedy is obviously that the individual was victimized. The biggest tragedy is that he died as a result, of course.
Yeah. And how do prosecutors come to making these types of decisions when it comes to upgrading charges? So, for instance, in this case, both of these defendants initially were just charged with like computer crimes, property crimes, etc. Now they've both been upgraded to second-degree murder. But how do prosecutors kind of make that decision?
It's a great question. I think the biggest thing when it comes to a case like this, first they have to figure out what the cause of death is. So they need to hear from the medical examiner before they can make any decisions. They also need to know if the cause of death and whether or not these two individuals are responsible, whether it's corroborated by the other evidence. So when you start to put together the cause of death with the video of the two of them going into the building, with her coming out without him, with her texting with Mr. White, talking about the whole idea of knocking him out and stealing things, all those things corroborate the idea that both of those two individuals were involved not just in taking property, but in ensuring that he was knocked out or drugged in order for them to do that. When an individual is knocked out or drugged, and then as a result of the stealing, they end up dying, that rises to the level of murder in many jurisdictions, including this one.
Yeah, and it's just hard kind of listening to the coroner kind of talk about, how the victim was found face down in his pillow. He had, alcohol in his system. He had Xanax in his system. But, police have said that the victim wasn't prescribed Xanax. It wasn't in his hotel room when they searched it, but they actually did recover Xanax from Danette Colbert's home instead. It's unclear if that's the exact same drug that was used that was found in Adan's system. But even just as far as circumstantial evidence, what do you kind of make of just the circumstantial evidence in this case that really kind of, seems like it's kind of having the nail in the coffin there?
Sure. I think the text messages are stronger. I think if you went to most people's house, you would find Xanax. So I'm not sure that is going to be the be all end all. And I'm sure the defense, one of the arguments is going to be, how can we prove that she made him take this? How can we, just because he didn't have a prescription doesn't mean he didn't take Xanax on his own. And certainly, did someone ply him with alcohol, or did he choose to drink the alcohol himself? And so there's certainly going to be pieces that the defense is going to be able to work with to kind of break down that this was just either a theft or robbery, and not to the level that this was an actual homicide, that this was an actual murder.
And do you think it's possible, given the other allegations, because even, Danette Colbert, the female defendant in this case, she was on probation at the time that she was arrested for doing similar crimes of allegedly drugging and robbing men. But given the severity of this case, given that a victim actually died as a result of her alleged actions, do you think it's possible that she could face more charges?
So when you say faced more charges, perhaps I think the real issue is how much time she's facing on the charges she's looking at. And I think one of the other things which in a sense you raised the point is, this is not the first time that she has been involved in this type of activity. And I think one of the questions they're going to be asking is, well, we know that she's involved in this one. We saw her in the video. We saw the text. Are there other victims out there that survived that haven't come forward? And that's going to be a question, because quite frankly, that will also make their case stronger if they're able to show she's done it multiple times. And now we have all these individuals that are coming out of the woodwork. They're able to show that there are other victims.
So previously at another bond hearing, the judge denied both defendants' bond. Now, this was before Ricky White his charges were upgraded to second-degree murder, but the judge said that he believes that White and even Colbert are both dangerous to society. What do you make of the judge saying that to them?
When it comes to bail, every state is different as to the basis of when a bail can be set. And certainly murder is one of the types of situations that in every state bail can be set, and high bail can be set. I don't think there's any questions based on the allegations. And of course, these are just allegations. But if those allegations are in fact true, one can only assume that these individuals are a dangerous society, because if you're willing to commit this type of crime and do it in the manner they did it, with the calculated discussion of how they're going to basically prey on their victim and how they're going to take advantage of them, then one can easily argue, and I think the judge is fair to say, that these are individuals that are dangerous to society and potentially not going to return to court.
And do you see a case like this going to trial, or do you think both of them will get a plea offer?
So that's always a great question with not a good answer. I mean, look, one of the issues that you always talk about when we talk about the situation where she might be the prostitute, he might be the pimp, maybe that there's room for some type of negotiations. Maybe she'll potentially testify against him. We don't know if there's domestic violence going on. We always think about the possibilities of things that we just don't know about the underlying relationship between her and Mr. White that may have brought them there. I'm not excusing it. I haven't seen any evidence that supports that, but I think time will tell whether or not the defense can find those things to mitigate the behavior of her, or sometimes the behavior of him.
Julie Rendelman, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate having you on. Before we sign you off, though, what do you think is going to happen next?
I think we're going to see the two of them in court together. I think we're going to start to see more evidence as the prosecutor provides it to the defense. And because if you recall, some of it's been kept a bit close to the vest. And I think there might be additional pieces of corroboration that support the fact that they were able to arrest these two individuals and believe they have enough to prove their guilt beyond reasonable doubt.
And of course, we'll be here to see how that all continues to unfold. Julie Rendelman, again, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's unclear if Ricky White entered a plea for his second-degree murder charge. And for now, both he and Danette Colbert remain in jail. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.